Quality City Center Radio. It is episode number 37. We're just motoring along. So happy to be back on the microphone. I hope you are all doing well here in the month of February. Today's guests are Cody, Callarman, and Chris Schneider. They are Marine Corps veterans from the Lowcountry who own a business called Zetro Farms. Cody is actually the founder and CEO of this. It's a hemp farm. They also have an online store related to that called the Carolina Dream. Chris is a employee of that business. He is helping, but together they are both pushing to legalize cannabis for people in need. Especially veterans or, people who are using opiates and becoming addicted to these pills that can be extraordinarily harmful, as we're all aware of the opiate epidemic that's happening in this country. So they are advocating to legalize cannabis for medical use. And I'm really excited to have them on because I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about cannabis in general, but specifically as it relates to helping people who have very specific medical conditions that it could help. So they're super knowledgeable. And they provided a lot of information and cleared up some of those misconceptions as we talked about the Compassionate Care Act, which is currently in the South Carolina Senate. We'll give you all the details about it, how you can help support it as well. It's a great conversation. You definitely will learn a lot, so be sure to listen to that. Lots of fun this past week. I actually got out and did some things. It was exciting. So since our last episode, number one, I did take part in Jenny's Splendid Ice Cream's Ice Cream for Breakfast Day, which was fantastic a couple Saturdays ago. They do this every year. There's a day for everything. And so every year on Ice Cream for Breakfast Day, they open early. It's always a Saturday. This year they wanted to try to set a world record. I don't know if there even is a world record, if they were just saying that to get people to participate, but they wanted you to share a hashtag and post that you ate ice cream for breakfast. So the fine folks at Jenny's were nice enough to reach out to me a month or so beforehand and gave me a free pint to enjoy. I just had to go to the store or have it delivered. And they had this delicious flavor that I just had to get. It was maple soaked pancakes is the name of the ice cream, and it was so good. I wanted to eat all of it, but I exercised some self-control, and there's still some in my freezer, so I get to enjoy it periodically here and there. But no, that was a lot of fun. Didn't really involve leaving my house, but I wanted to brag about how I got free ice cream, and it was delicious. The other things I did involved some new restaurants, so that was exciting. Not only getting out again, and events are starting to happen. I went to an art event for Siwi a week ago, but being able to try out these new restaurants has been a lot of fun too. So first was Poke Burri, B-U-R-R-I. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. It's a small chain that started in the Atlanta area. They are now in what's called the Victory Building, which is in Avondale. It's the building that used to be the thrift shop. It kind of has that big column in front of it. They've redone this building. It looks pretty cool. And they have several businesses in there, including this poke place. So they serve poke, of course. They also serve sushi. And I went out because they just added a second concept. It's really the same restaurant, but they call it Lifting Noodles Ramen. And they've done that concept in Atlanta and their Georgia area locations. So you can also order ramen from them. So I tried out the ramen, was good. I enjoyed it. I actually went back and got some more later, like a week after. But the other reason I went back is they have some kind of funky sushi options, including something called a Sushi Donut. They have sushi pizza. And then they also have a secret menu, one of those it's not printed on the menu, but it's not really secret. They also have something called a sushi corn dog, which, again, not on the menu, but they did have they have a chalkboard in there, and it was a secret menu item, sushi corn dog. So, you could walk in and see it's available. So I went back because I wanted to try one of those. So I tried the sushi donut. Basically, the donut part itself is just the rice, the sticky rice. And then on top, they'll put whatever, So I did I think I did a crab one. So they had crab on top and then the different sauces. It looks you could tell it's sushi, but it looks, it's the shape of a donut, and it was good. It's just like eating a sushi roll, just in a really bizarre shape, not the normal way. It was very tasty. I enjoyed it. It's fun. It makes for good Instagram photos and all that. If you have a chance to stop by, you can. And should, because the food was good. And you can also look up these items online to see pictures of like sushi pizza and stuff. It's pretty cool. So enjoyed that experience. The food was good, not just unique looking. It was tasty as well. The other restaurant, well, technically two restaurants. There's a place on Upper King Street you're all probably familiar with called Uptown Social. They've got a couple, I think 2 floors. I don't think they're up to 3. I think it's 2 floors. And, it's like a sports bar, restaurant, but they have like really good food there. And they launched a concept called Bodega during the pandemic. So it's like New York City style bagel sandwiches. And it was so popular, they decided to try to open their own, standalone location, and they did that. So Bodega is now open on Ann Street in the right next to the Children's Museum, in that space that, like, I think it used to be like an old train depot and previously held some other restaurants. There were several concepts that were there, including like a tiki bar, and none of them survived, unfortunately. But now we have 2 restaurants in there, Bodega and Share House. The Share House concept is more of they have like a beachy vibe to it. So there's like these garage doors on the side of this building that they open up, so the breeze is coming in. The colors inside are bright. They have like sliders and like, bites like that. And then they have like a drink menu that was like tropical drinks. And so it's like a whole beachy vibe. Specifically, they're just like with Bodega, it's like a New York, they're trying to have like the beach house. I guess apparently, I didn't know this even though growing up in Connecticut, I guess Share House is like a name for some beach houses like on Long Island and things like that. And so a lot of their dishes and the drinks have names of towns in the Northeast, like beach towns. So there was one like the Westerly, whatever, I forget the name of it, and Westerly being in Rhode Island. So it was cool. Like for me, especially being from the Northeast, having like these reminders of home and nearby places to my home. And I didn't get to really try any of the food. It was like a preview event, so I just kind of went to check out the space. They had some local artists that painted the building. It looks awesome. So if you have a chance, go check them out. Bodega is open early in the morning because they're all, besides breakfast sandwiches, they have a coffee program and things like that. So congrats to the Uptown Social crew on opening 2 concepts at once, and they're already seeming to be doing really good business. Really cool space. The other fun thing I did, I was honored to be asked by WREN, W-R-E-N, to serve on a panel discussion that they have. They have some, and I should also say, for those who aren't familiar, WREN is the Women's Rights and Empowerment Network. They do advocacy for different issues, obviously involving women's rights. And I've followed their work for a long time and was honored to serve on this panel. And it was they have like a group of fellows, who they're teaching about how you can advocate for things and how you can speak to, get legislation done, like just basically giving them the background. Like if you want to help us or, do your own thing, this is how you can get involved in advocacy. And so for the panel I was on was for local media. And so they would ask questions about like, how do you prefer to get information? What's the best way to get the news to cover our stories that were, and things like that. And so it was really cool to be on there. Carolyn Murray from News 2 was there. And then they had a print journalist from Greenville. And so I guess I was like the designated blogger, social media, pseudo media person. So I was honored to be there, and it was a really cool experience. So I really appreciated that. So that's what I've been up to. Everything else in Holy City Centerland is pretty normal. But it's been nice to get back out there and do some things. So with that, we'll move on to some of the top stories from the past week. All right, so let's start with some updates before we get into the new news. Updates from previous stories. I mentioned in the last episode, I believe, about the gerrymandering that was taking place or that took place. The maps were approved, these new congressional districts. Henry McMaster, our governor, signed it. And I mentioned that there could be legal challenges, and I would keep you updated. Well, here we go. So this comes from the state newspaper on February 15th. If you want to go read the whole article, and I recommend you do because it was very informative. But a federal complaint was officially filed on behalf of the South Carolina chapter of the NAACP. It alleges that lawmakers use race as a primary factor in drawing the 1st, 2nd, and 5th congressional districts in order to dilute the voting strength of black South Carolinians in those districts and maintain political power. in that suit, they said that these congressional districts perpetuate the state's, quote, persistent legacy of discrimination against black voters, end quote. Obviously, that would be in violation of the U.S. Constitution, and they say that this must be these lines must be redrawn. So the court filing is actually an amendment to a lawsuit that was originally brought back in October that challenges 29 of the recently adopted state house districts on similar grounds. And it marks the first of what could be multiple legal challenges against this new congressional map. So there was already a challenge. They added these districts to that challenge. And so this could be a long process, and you know how things go. There'll be appeals and, motions and all this other stuff. And there's already been one delay since this news was announced because the hearing was supposed to happen. The trial, actually, not a hearing, was originally set to happen at the end of this month. But it's already been rescheduled for a later yet to be determined date. So we'll keep you posted. But as expected, those new congressional lines have been or will be facing a legal challenge. It's just a matter of when that ends up happening. The other update involves that darn statue. The statue of John C. Calhoun, who, of course, is the former United States vice president and an ardent racist who once called slavery a positive good. His statue could find a new home soon. We talked about there's a group in L.A. who wanted to have it loaned out to them for an exhibition they were doing. Well, now it might find a different home. The statue that used to tower over Marion Square may be on its way to our state capitol instead. The city of Charleston and the South Carolina State Museum in Columbia said they were close to a deal that would move the statue to the Capitol. As part of the deal, Charleston would loan the statue to the museum, who would be responsible for transporting it to Columbia as well as maintaining and preserving it. So the city of Charleston wouldn't have to pay anything for this whole ordeal. Which is good, of course. There is no set timeline on this. And as far as the whole LA art exhibit thing, that's not ruled out completely yet. That's something that still could happen. It's just there hasn't been an update in a little while. So who knows what will end up happening. That scenario was similar where that group would pay for transporting and taking care of the statue when it was in their care before sending it back to Charleston. So there are now two places who want at least a temporary home, although the museum may keep it permanently. So we'll see what happens. We'll keep you updated. The last update of a former story way back almost a full year ago in episode 6, we had Gabe Pilato on. He was a board member and still is for the Friends of Joseph Floyd Manor. He came on, you may remember, he told us about the deplorable conditions at that public housing facility, which is mostly designated for elderly and disabled citizens, which, it's horrible anyway. But when you think some of our vulnerable communities are in this housing, it made it even worse. Well, the Post and Courier had an update on the 14th of this month. Nearly a year and a half after the aging apartment building received a failing grade from its federal inspection, it is finally getting some of the upkeep and repairs from the Charleston County Housing and Redevelopment Authority. So Gabe, who I mentioned before, is a board member for Friends of Joseph Floyd Manor. That was just a group of people who were like, this place is horrible. Things are not getting done here. We need to help these residents out. So they're not even the official people who were supposed to be doing it. They created a group to make that happen. Well, now the group that was supposed to be taking care of this property, the Charleston County Housing and Redevelopment Authority, is finally getting these repairs done. They have a new executive director. The last one was ousted. They cleared up some hurdles that they had. Apparently this board owes money that they're still paying back, which also made it difficult for them to have anything done. You can read more about it in the Post and Courier's article. I'm not going to get into it. The important thing is they're finally making repairs and improvements for these people who live there. The authority actually operates independently of both the city and county of Charleston. It is governed by a board of commissioners. So just so you kind of understand why there's some holdups and whatnot. Again, go read the whole article. It's worth a read because it also has a lot of updates on it as well. So thankfully, some of these horrid conditions inside Floyd Manor are being taken care of. There's still lots of work to be done, but at least things are getting done. You can learn more and help out with friendsofjoseph.floydmanor.com. I'll have a link in the show notes so you can help them as they will still be there because it's not just the city, state, or a board's failure. There are just some things that are out of their purview that they do fun things for the residents just to kind of help them out, because these residents might struggle with, food insecurity and things like that. So they sometimes will bring food and toiletries and things to help these folks. So you can still support no matter how much work is being done on the building. There's always more to be done. All right, for new news, I keep saying it week after week, but there's just so much. So unfortunately, I can't get to everything, but I will get us to, a couple stories at least. The first one is quick. Thoughts and prayers go out to Charleston Police Chief Luther Reynolds in his battle with a rare and aggressive form of cancer. That probably isn't news to y'all. That's been out there for a while. But back on the 4th of this month, the city provided an update from Chief Reynolds. In that update, the police chief said that he underwent what he called a radical surgery that led to his doctors amputating one of his legs. So unfortunately, he did have to lose one of his legs in this battle with cancer. He also said that the cancer, though, was successfully removed, so it worked. The surgery worked. And his prognosis for the future is, quote, very positive. He's currently rehabbing at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, which did the surgery, and he hopes to be back soon. So pretty good news, even though, like you said, pretty radical surgery had to be done. But he plans on coming back, and we wish him well in that. The other one is an update I've been wanting to give forever, and I'm so happy to finally be able to give it, even though there's still work to be done. Charleston City Council members recently voted 9-4 to finally establish the Human Affairs and Racial Conciliation Committee. This was during a meeting at City Hall back on February 9th. Good news, good news, good news. Still a lot of work to be done. I'll give you some more details here in a second, but the commission has officially been approved. We are finally underway. So that commission was passed along with some amendments from Councilmember Peter Shade, which he said would narrow down like what this new commission could actually do. The amendments also define, like what equity means. In this scenario, they have it mean guaranteeing fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement while trying to take down barriers that have prevented some groups from fully participating. 3 council members will eventually take part in the commission. That is yet to be determined who it will be, while the others will nominate a person from their district to represent their area. So that means there'll be 3 council members and then some community members as well that have been nominated. So that is yet to happen since this was just approved, but that's how the committee will work, or the commission will work going forward. That's great. Also great news is that some of the more restrictive amendments were shot down. Council member Caroline Parker, who is new, relatively new, her term started in January. She was one of the 4 members who voted against the commission. She presented several amendments, some of which didn't make sense because they mentioned things like critical race theory, that whole, we've talked about this before, CRT, oh my God, it's the boogeyman, and it's not taught in any South Carolina schools, but she put that in an amendment and all sorts of stuff. There were some contradictory ones. It was just not a real well thought out process, in my opinion. But in any event, she presented several amendments. They were initially shot down all at once, just like, hey, do we want to approve Council Member Parker's amendments? The vote was no. They did the vote out loud instead of one by one. It was clear that the amendments were not accepted, but she requested that they do a roll call for some reason, so wasting plenty of time. So after they're all shot down at once, she demanded a roll call. They gave her the roll call. It confirmed that, yes, in fact, her amendments were shot down. Then she requested that they vote one by one on the amendments, since she didn't get her way. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know all the ins and outs, so I don't know how everything can be shot down all at once, but then they backtrack and say, okay, we'll do it one by one. I don't know how that process works, but that's how it played out. So they then voted one by one on each of her amendments. I think there was something in the neighborhood of 13 or 14. And I won't lie, it ended up, as annoying as it was at first, it ended up being somewhat satisfying to have each one of her amendments shot down one by one. And not only were they shot down one by one, they were done so soundly. None were even close as far as the votes were concerned. So, I mean, I did kind of enjoy that, I won't lie. Speaking of Councilmember Parker, the meeting had to be stopped several times due to her out-of-turn interruptions. She kept trying to speak when it wasn't her turn, not understanding the rules of the council and how these things work. She also made a false accusation at one point about removing monuments to Mayor Tecklenburg, and Mayor Tecklenburg was like, I don't know what you're talking about, basically. All we've done is remove the Calhoun statue. I don't know what you're referencing. And she was like, oh, okay, I heard that somewhere. So just like bringing up something that wasn't even true. And it also, the meeting got delayed, not just for those two reasons, but several times because she had a misunderstanding or a confusion about the rules of the meeting. She would stop and like, wait, can we do this? Wait, how do we do? Wildly unprepared for the meeting, despite the fact this is now her it would have been his second meeting. Since January. So just really frustrating to watch. These meetings are boring and frustrating to watch anyway, but when someone doesn't understand the rules, they're interrupting and they're causing further delays, it just became even more annoying. And you know what? That wasn't it. It was a tough meeting for Parker. Not only were all her amendments shot down, not only did she, interrupt the meeting and look kind of silly, and also got chastised at one point by another council member. Her and one of the other new folks were kind of taken to task for not understanding the rules, for not being prepared. So that was, again, a little fun to watch. I'm not going to lie. But so she had to deal with that. But she also was at the kids' table for the meeting. So Charleston requires anyone entering City Hall to wear a mask and show proof of vaccination status or a recent negative COVID test. She's refused to do this since she was put in office. This was her first in-person meeting since she, continued to refuse to wear a mask or follow the rules. She had previously come in virtually via, like Zoom or something like that. So this was her first in-person meeting. So does that mean she wore a mask? No, of course not. She was allowed to attend, but in order to do so, they put her at her own table away from the connected tables of the rest of the council. She was also put behind a 3-sided plexiglass partition at her own table because she refused to wear a mask or provide, vaccination proof, negative test proof. So it was already funny if you watch the meeting, she's sitting, again, like I said, the joke, she was like at the kids' table. Like, the adults are over here following the rules and doing business like we're supposed to. You go sit at your own table behind that wall since you don't want to follow the rules and think you're special and unique. And so it was already funny seeing that and knowing the background to it, and then seeing her just flail with these amendments and not knowing how things work. And look, totally. And I said, there's another council member, a brand new one, the District 1, Greg Boyd. He also had a moment where he didn't quite understand the rules, but he didn't do it constantly. It wasn't this consistent interruption. And, I get it. Like, it's complicated. It's confusing. It's okay to not know every single in and out of how a meeting is supposed to work for city council, because you have to concede your time sometimes. And if someone doesn't concede their time, no one else can talk. And anyway, it's a whole thing. So I get that, but it was just consistent throughout the evening and done so in such an annoying fashion each time. And then you couple that with the whole mask thing and her being behind the glass. It was funny to see. I'm not going to lie to you. As annoying as it probably was for the council member. So hopefully after being taken to task, she'll at least follow the rules. I am under no illusions that she will be a council member that I will agree with on really much of anything. It's already become clear that she's not someone that is aligned with me politically, which is fine. But if she can follow the rules, it'll make it a little bit more tolerable, and she'll seem more competent at least. So we'll see if things get better for her. But yikes, her first in-person meeting did not go well. And her fellow council members, many of them you could tell were visibly frustrated with her. So if you were wondering, yes, she is going to be my new Harry Griffin. We got Harry Griffin out of office. She's going to be my new person that I'm probably going to talk about a lot because she's very frustrating to me. After hearing that, you may think so too. All right, enough of that. Enough of bashing Councilmember Carolyn Parker. Those are our latest updates. So much more to talk about, but we got to wait because we got such a cool interview coming up, and we ended up going a little bit longer on the interview than normal because it was so fascinating. And they had a lot of good information for us. So I'm really excited to talk about it. We're going to learn about the Compassionate Care Act. where it stands, what it actually would do and wouldn't do. We'll clear up some misconceptions about the act, about medical cannabis. Really great interview with Cody Callarman and Chris Schneider of Zetro Farms and the Carolina Dream. And as I mentioned before, they are also Marine Corps veterans from the Lowcountry, and they're trying to legalize cannabis for people in need to help get off opiates, or it just might be the best thing for them in their treatment plan. So without further ado, here's my interview. Joining me now are Cody Kellerman and Chris Schneider. They are Marine Corps veterans from the Lowcountry who are pushing to legalize cannabis for people in need of its benefits, especially veterans and other folks who are using opioids and becoming addicted to those harmful pills. I'm really excited to learn more about their activism and what's currently going on with the South Carolina legislature. Cody and Chris, thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course, man. Glad to be here.
Me too. Thanks for having us.
Oh, of course. So before we start diving into the topic, I want to learn a little bit about each of you so our listeners know your background and how you kind of got to this point. So if you could each take a turn and introduce yourself first, so that way people also will know the differences between your voices. But yeah, just a little, where are you from, how you got into the Marine Corps, and then what led you to, want to be an activist for medical cannabis. So whoever wants to go first, go right ahead.
So I'm Cody, went to high school over at Stratford and Goose Creek with Chris. Technically didn't really know him back then. Joined the Marine Corps, probably less than a month after graduating high school. Did that for 4 years. Lived out in California for another 8 years after leaving the Marine Corps as an instructor, teaching the job I had. Had a business out there, bought a duplex. And 2020, right when COVID hit, I was like, perfect time to quit my stable government job and go be a hemp farmer in South Carolina, right? Because that's everybody's dream.
Sure.
There's a long laundry list of things that, where this all came from. So like the farm is Zetro Farms, and Zetro is Ortiz backwards. Julian Ortiz went to high school with Chris and I. Joined the Marine Corps with us also, and he probably like one of the best role models of like what a true American should be, right? Serve to serve his country. Went to join and serve his country for everything he stood for, and he was a huge role model to me. And in 2012, actually tomorrow on the 22nd, he took his life. Or excuse me, 2013. I talked to him the night before for hours. I made him laugh before he got off the phone, went to bed, and I woke up the next morning to my mom, hysterically crying. She called me. She said, Julian's dead. And that was really when my eyes opened of, years after the Marine Corps. I keep losing more and more Marines to suicide and overdoses than I have in combat in Afghanistan. And between that and then my mother in 2014 had a back surgery through the top of her hip. And during the surgery, they accidentally fried her femoral nerve in her right leg, completely frying it. Her right leg is basically paralyzed now still, partially. And she's in excruciating pain. She was up after pain management. She was up on 128 milligrams of opioids plus Flexerols a day. Wow. She was barely able to speak, barely able to eat. And, she probably would have died. And that's the first time, I've seen cannabis back in high school, never really got into it. And it wasn't until after seeing it just help so many people. And that's with my mom. Someone got her a weed brownie and she got appetite. So I kind of went ding, ding, and good idea. And I had to find ways to get it to her. And unfortunately, in South Carolina, it's breaking the law. And within 2 to 3 months, she was completely off all the opioids.
Wow.
And went back to work a couple months after that. And for me at the time, so now if we fast forward to 2016, 17, as most military people do, I was abusing alcohol. I'm iron deficient anemic for some reason since the Marine Corps. We can't figure that one out. So I shouldn't really be drinking. And I got in some trouble, almost lost everything. And I finally had an Army buddy that I worked with. He's a user because he spent a total of 2 years in country, got blown up. All those things that come with service. And he said, dude, just try cannabis. Like it'll help you. Just believe me. And so first time, I think he gave me way too much. I didn't enjoy it whatsoever. But the second time, the first thing I thought of was, how is this illegal and alcohol isn't?
Yeah.
And since then, and Chris will tell you his story here in a second, but like during that time period, I was going through a lot, and this, pre-COVID, but I was very lucky that I lived in a recreational state. Like I could walk 3 blocks down the road, buy some gummies, and I've had the best sleep in my life. To me, it's a completely harmless plant. And then coming back here, frustrations with the hemp industry because it's unregulated, and just the general stigma with cannabis. And I'm always the group leader in group projects. So no one was doing really anything really in the veteran community. So I was like, all right, cool. This is my thing now. And I've always been a teacher. So I was teaching after the Marine Corps. So that's what I do now. I teach. I sit down with senators, representatives, lobbyists, and I try to give them a very non-biased, like, this is what the medical industry should look like. This is how this plant could help. And I can go into details, but that will require hours, a dry erase board and some medical terms. I'm not going to bore you all to death. We can do a special episode or something. But so, yeah, that's what led up to, I guess you could say, a year ago. So I'll let Chris go because that's where I brought him in.
Yeah, where do I begin? Like Cody said, we went to high school together, didn't really know each other. It wasn't until we both joined the Marine Corps, our friend Tyler Boone was like, hey, you guys are my friends. You guys should totally know each other. And since that, he connected Cody and I, and Cody was more like a mentor to me throughout the Marine Corps. He was in quite a bit of time before I was. So I get out of the military in, 2013. And like we said before, our friend Julian took his life, and it changed both Cody's life and I. It was a real wake-up call. And then after that, I had another friend who took their life, and it was just, okay, what's going on here? So I had my own experience getting out of the military, which was pretty hard. I isolated myself when I was in college in a town that I didn't know really anyone. And I went to the VA. That's what we're told to do when we get out of the military, when you start feeling all these feelings, isolating yourself. So I went to the VA, got help. And they put me on pills. They put me on Zoloft, bupropion. For my sleep, they put me on Ambien. I couldn't sleep. I had acute back pain. They gave me Percocet. So for a while there, it was just not a good time. Life was numb. I felt lost. The meds didn't help. So I stopped taking the meds. And of course, I started seeing all the studies come out about cannabis, all the medical journals, all the studies. And I started illegally consuming cannabis. It was a risk I took. I had to find employment that worked around me being able to consume cannabis without having to take a urinalysis test or something like that. So 2020 comes about, the pandemic happens, and I was working for Anheuser-Busch, and I wanted to try something different other than where I was living in Asheville. I also wanted to try somewhere that had legal cannabis. So I tried out Oregon. And when I experienced Oregon and the recreational legal cannabis out there, again, like Cody said, why is this illegal in South Carolina? I don't get it. It's completely normal out here. Everyone, all walks of life and creed, they all smoke and consume cannabis. It's completely part of normal life out there. So when Cody hit me up, what was it, Cody, 8 months ago? You're like
September, I called you,
yeah.
I think at like 9 o'clock at night watering plants. I'm like, hey, you want to come help me?
And I was like, man, I'm kind of over this 9-to-5 job. I brought my father out to Oregon. My father's a 22-year retired Navy veteran. And I saw what, cannabis did for him in 10 days of just being out in Oregon and consuming it regularly. He's like, I can feel my fingers. I don't have the tingling in my fingers again because he has nerve damage. And I was like, all right, yeah, this is it. This is the right move. And so here I am. I'm back in South Carolina, bringing the good fight to people of South Carolina so we can have legal cannabis for everyone.
Awesome. Thank you guys both for sharing your story. Now I want to touch on a couple things before I ask a next question. Number one, but thank you both for your service. I should have said that at the top. We appreciate that, of course. And also you did mention Tyler Boone, who is a friend of the show, friend of mine. He was on a past episode, so folks listening may remember him. He is the one who put us all in touch, so we appreciate that. And then also I just want to mention, you mentioned that your friend had died by suicide, and unfortunately that's something that touches a lot of us. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the number is something like 22 people, veterans or people currently in the armed forces die a day. I think that's the number, which is just devastating when you think about And, as you kind of alluded to, some of that may be related to PTSD or mental disorders related to service or pain. And, it's just sad that if there's something out there that can help folks, that unfortunately, depending on where they live, like you both mentioned, they may not be able to get it. So I just wanted to kind of touch on those things before we moved on. So you guys both were able to see the benefits in your own lives and family members with being able to use cannabis medically. And that drove you, being South Carolina natives or spent time here, to want to advocate for getting this legalized, at least medicinally, as that's the most important reason at this point in time. With you both kind of mentioned your experience with it and how it differed from opiates. And I think opiates, most people now know how dangerous they can be and how many people unfortunately get addicted to them and what that can lead to. Besides that being like a safer alternative, was it also working better for you than the opiates were?
I'll go on that first. So I never, after seeing what happened to my mother, if you look in my VA medical record, it'll say in big bold letters, "will not take pills." And I remember once being at the VA, my former primary care physician, probably one of the best doctors I've ever had in my life, and he knows I don't take pills. And I just remember saying, "Hey, like I have a hard time sleeping." And he's like, "Oh, do you want some pills for that?" And I remember saying back, "That shouldn't be the first and only option." Mm-hmm. Sorry, what was the question? I was about to go off.
Oh, no,
just like, I want to stay focused.
Yeah, sure. So with opiates, the difference is whether it was you personally taking them, it sounds like you hadn't, but people in your family, are they using cannabis medically? Is it working just as well as the opiates would for things like pain, or working better? Like, what were the differences besides, the obvious, like what could happen if you become addicted and things like that? Like, what, in your experiences, was it just as good as far as helping your problems or better?
Yeah, I think for me, I had an injury and I had some GI issues that the VA couldn't really figure out, make me take just like vitamin, like iron pills and stuff. Mm-hmm. And if I took about 3 to 5 milligrams of a gummy, mainly in the sativa realm, every 3 to 4 hours, I didn't need coffee. I'm pretty much ADD, and it really helps me focus. And then once I started using daily, all my GI issues went away, and that's for me personally. But I'll let Chris go because he's definitely the one that was on the pills, unfortunately.
Yeah, you can go right ahead, Chris.
So yeah, the VA had me on Ambien at one point, and they would give me 10 milligrams to start off. I'd take one a night, and it would genuinely help me go to sleep. But then you acclimate to it, then you need more, and you acclimate to the point where you're just taking this drug to take it, because you rely on it. And I was actually talking to my friend the other day, who's my roommate back in the day, telling him about everything going on right now. And he was like, "Man, I remember you were in college and you would just take those pills and you would just come in the room and talk. And the next day, I don't remember the conversation."
Wow.
So cannabis definitely for me allows me to get better sleep, quality sleep. It allows me to sit with myself. I felt like when I take Zoloft and ibuprofen at the same time, I would just be a zombie. My brain would just be just existing, getting by, not really thinking about how to better myself, how to sit with myself, my thoughts, and process my own stuff. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And, I think now is a good time to kind of talk about like misconceptions and things like that. Obviously, you guys are advocating for medical cannabis, so you must be gigantic potheads who don't do any work all day. I know you mentioned you have some business, but I'm sure it's not successful. You're probably lazy, just snacking all the time. Let's clear up some of those things. And you mentioned sativa as well, which is a type, a strand, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if I'm using the appropriate terms, but a lot of people when they think about marijuana, they're thinking, whatever back in high school, some, kids were using it, and they don't realize that now, especially with states having it legalized, that they can grow these strands that can be specific for issues that people have. So you might be able to walk into like a dispensary in a state that legalized it and say, I have an issue with this, or, what do you recommend? And they can specify a strand that would be good for it. So I think that's one big misconception, that there's just like this one type. There's all sorts of things that are out there, but also, some of those other misconceptions around cannabis use. If you guys want to touch on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it as short as I can. So I think the one thing is, right, lawmakers keep calling it marijuana, and I know with our medical bill they say you can't use slang, so we can't call it weed, pot. We can't say the strain names. And I'm like, well, that's kind of ironic because the word marijuana is slang. It was,
right.
It goes back to the 1900s and really the 1930s. It was used to make it sound exotic, to make it sound dangerous. And that's so you'll never hear me say the word marijuana. I say cannabis because that's the actual, I guess you could say, the scientific identifier of the plant. So a lot of people think, oh, you just get, be high, be lazy. And when I first started consuming, I know you have indica, which you think in the couch, so it relaxes you, and you have sativa, which is kind of I guess you can call it like a daytime energetic. But if you really start going down the rabbit hole, if you go to like a recreational state or medical state, if it's a good bud tender or physician or pharmacist, whoever's in there, you should be able to just list, this is what I'm feeling. I want to be able to feel this. I want a body high, a little bit, euphoric, but I'm still mentally there. I'm not completely zooted out on the couch, I guess you could say. And they'll pick a strain for you. And I get into so the cannabis plant has every single traces of every single terpene from all plants. So I'm trying to really break this down. So let's say pine has, pine, right? So the pine tree, that's scent, pine, the taste of pine when you think about it. Mm-hmm. The pine tree has that one. Citrus is citrus. Pepper's pepper. So every kind of plant has its own terpene. The cannabis and hemp plant has trace amounts of all of those in it. And example, we were at the Capitol last week when they passed it through the Senate, and they had a nurse's thing downstairs where they're doing, with your heart rate and your blood pressure. And I was just talking to one of the nurses, and she says, she has fibromyalgia, which is a extremely painful, essentially your nerve in your head can just randomly go off, and it's excruciating pain. And she's like, I know cannabis helps with it, but I'm a nurse, I get drug tests, I can't do this and that. Is there anything in the hemp world that can work? And I'm like, well, yes, THC has a better potency with those terpenes in it, but hemp also has it. So I just did a quick Google search, found that, and I'm not going to try to say the actual term because I can't pronounce the 8 big words. It's beta something, and it's essentially the pepper terpene. So if it's a pepper note you would smell off the plant. I go through my CBD plants, my COAs, the certificate of analysis, and it has a breakdown of it. And 25% of my mustard berry strain has this pepper terpene in it. And I was just, educating her on, I'll try to get you this processed for you to try. And then whenever you have this nerve pain in your head, try consuming this hemp to see if it can help with it. So I'm really excited to hear back on that. I talked to a gentleman I was at a show in Vegas, and he runs a nonprofit for, it's called Men Against Cancer. And, he says, one is your hemp work. And I could talk about how the hemp industry is awful because there's no regulation. And I said, well, yes, I take a lot of care into knowing exactly, telling you where the plant was planted, where it got processed, watching the everywhere where that plant goes. And I said, well, this Miss B I got right here, this is really high in this one terpene, which helps a lot with, well, I can't say helps with because it's not FDA approved, has been known to help with colon issues. So I gave him some samples in the mail, and he gave it to his patients that have colon cancer. And he said, it's not an end all be all, but it does help with the pain. So you can really, and I guess one day I'll have a master class on this and get really scientific, but you can if you have certain issues you want to try to fix with enough research and looking into what terpene, you can find a strain that will be perfect for you in whatever your condition is.
There's I think over the last I'm going to say 5-ish years, I started to look into this stuff more because I heard about CBD, and as someone who has pretty bad anxiety, I was just like interested. I'm hearing about this thing. It's not illegal. And we don't have to dive down that whole rabbit hole of the different types of, things that are legal, and what the differences are. But that's when I started looking into this and I started to learn more. And it is really fascinating. Like you said, like just the science behind it, there is so much more that you just don't realize. Because again, when we think about cannabis, you think about maybe your high school days or whatever. And whatever your experience was from that time, you don't realize now, because this industry is kind of still in its infancy as far as research and being legal in places like Colorado. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, because I think Colorado was the first state to legalize it, it hasn't been that long. So there's still a lot of studies going on and a lot of changes that can be done. But yeah, it can get really fascinating. And I've found articles or read things, especially as South Carolina is debating this Compassionate Care Act. I wanted to learn more about it, and you can go down a rabbit hole with all this stuff, and you can get as deep as you want to with the science and things. It's really fascinating, and sounds like you both are finding that out as well.
Yeah, I'm a person, when I find something that's interesting, I will stay up all night and research it. And that's all I do. And I think, I try to stay as unbiased to it as possible. And of course, one of the things I've learned by going up to the Capitol, and just, people think, oh, you have to be a lobbyist to sit there. And no, it's a public place. And I know the first press conference I brought Chris to, he was blown away by, he was standing there, we're waiting for the press conference to start. And, senators were just coming up and talking to him, asking, hey, where are you from? What's your name? Like, why are you here? Okay. It's really, they're receptive. That's their job. And I think there's a lot of misconception with, when we see things in the news, we see like 3-second clips, when there was in the Senate, like Senator Davis was on the floor speaking for like 4 to 6 hours a day for 3 days a week for 3 weeks, essentially, until this bill got through the Senate.
Wow.
This is a very long form discussion. And I used to have a little bit of, why are they against it? This and that. And I will admit, listening to the way it's debated in the Senate, and when it was in the Senate, it gave me a lot of respect, even for the opposition, because they are truly looking out for, South Carolinians. And they wanted to make sure this bill was done right. Now, one of the things I don't agree with is the opposition will throw around the term, there's anecdotal evidence that this can help. And, anecdotal means not enough. It's personal review, And you sit there and think about it like, well, 70% of the states in this country have approved medical cannabis, including Mississippi was the last one.
Wow.
Mississippi.
Yeah.
And it's, and they've been, I think, 1990 something was Denver. I can't remember.
1996.
Oh, is that long ago? Wow.
Yeah, so it's been a long time, and I think there is way more than enough proof. Thousands of medical journals. A lot of the good ones that come out are either from London or especially Israel, especially when it comes to PTSD, because in Israel, every citizen has to serve, I think it's like 2 to 4 years in the military. And so there's a lot of PTSD there, and they do some of the best research where, yes, it can help. Also want to give a shout out to Gary Hess at VAHA, which is the Veterans Alliance for Holistic Alternatives. He came from Louisiana to help us, I guess you could say, pitch it to the Senate of how it helps veterans. And his organization's really looking at, with doctors, of how veterans can use cannabis and I hate using the high cycle, but while you're going through that cycle of being high, you can have your counselor or a therapist talk to you in a certain timeline, if that makes sense. It really helps you pull out information from yourself. I watched a video on it, and I found it truly, fascinating. And that just goes to show there's so much, like you said, we're in its infancy, and there's so many great things this plant can do. God knows what we can do 10 years from now, and it's legal federally. There's way more research that's federally funded and approved. And it's very, I'm an optimist at heart, but I have faith that, our bill will make it through the House of Representatives. So it's going to the 3M committee. It has to go through the committee before it goes to the House, and it goes to the governor's desk. And there's more and more people running for government office in South Carolina that are running on the platform of at least medical. And there is a lot of opposition from even supporters that say this bill is way too conservative. It's only helping 13 medical conditions. And to that I say, well, can you put your differences aside and help us get this bill through? If I can help, I think the number is 200,000 South Carolinians that would be approved for, I guess you could say. At least I'm helping 200,000 people instead of zero. And then,
not even that,
go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but not even that, but think about the people that have left South Carolina for legal cannabis that can now come home.
Right. That's a good point. And I think that's a good, I'm glad you said that, because just because it's not as expansive as some people would want. And of course there's people out there who want it, decriminalized and completely legal as well. But the more important issue is to get it cleared medically to help people who really, really need it, not recreationally necessarily, but they need it for medical reasons. And you mentioned Senator Tom Davis. He's a Beaufort Republican, and hats off to him. He's been pushing this for a long time, years, not just recently. And this is the best chance that it's had to be passed ever. And, just kind of what you alluded to, it's hard in South Carolina. It's crazy that it's finally gotten to a point where even that might be approved, because even just 3 years ago, the Attorney General here, Alan Wilson, called cannabis the U.S.'s, quote, most dangerous drug, which is just a wild statement to make for many, many reasons. So, 3 years ago, if you were to tell me hey, there's this Compassionate Care Act for medical cannabis in South Carolina that's got a pretty decent chance of actually getting passed, I would have told you you're out of your mind because of that quote. I would just say it's just so difficult. But there does seem to be, not just in South Carolina, but nationwide, a groundswell of support for at least, medical cannabis. And yeah, so what's the latest update? You said right now it passed in the House, and it's Senate Bill 150 for those who are interested to look it up. So it's on a committee now, and that if that committee approves it, then it heads to the Senate. Is that where we stand?
So reverse. So it got through the Senate, and then it got put over to the House of Representatives. The Speaker of the House decided to put it in the 3M committee, which is great. That's can't remember the third M, but it's medical, military, and I think it has to do with municipality, counties. And once it's approved through that committee, then it goes to the floor of the House of Representatives. So we're not near done yet. I know Chris and I were kind of talking about this, where the last couple months have been so much going on, and then in the last 3 weeks while this was going on, we were going up to Columbia twice a week, and it is just the momentum for this year compared to last year is unprecedented. And I know it's going to make it through. There's a lot of back and forth on it, but I think, whenever I go up there, I just kind of tell, the certain senators and representatives, I'm here just to give pure perspective as a veteran, someone that's lived in a state where it's legal, seen the uses of it. And, I'm in the hemp industry, so I could kind of give you there's a difference between how it's going to work in real life and how, I guess you could say, politicians think it's going to work. So I just, for me, I just want this to be the best bill it can be. And of course, let's just start helping people. And then I know a lot of politicians are worried that this is the gateway to recreational cannabis. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not up to them. It's up to the people, right? And if we're, if this medical bill gets through and people are mad because there's no flower, we can't smoke flower in the bill, write your legislators. That's, the government doesn't work unless we tell them how to make it work correctly, right? Chris has a great quote. Or what's that line you use, Chris?
If you want to be a part of democracy, you have to be involved in it.
Absolutely.
Democracy has the word, you have to be involved in it. Sorry.
And you just,
so it's all about showing up, really.
I think you just made a good point. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I want to touch on that. I forgot that part of the bill is that it does not cover flower. So you won't be seeing people, if this is passed, being able to, like, light up a joint, or be able to purchase or get flower from a medical place. So there's a couple limitations. One is, and if you could, because I'm sure you guys know, what is going to be approved is if this goes through, like, how will people be able to get medical cannabis in what forms? And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't part of the bill also they could only get it in very specific places?
Yeah, so again, it's the most conservative bill in the country. And so there's essentially gummies, soft cap pills, tinctures, and they're allowing for vaping. So technically smoking, but you're actually not smoking the flower. And that was from law enforcement, and I can understand why, so that's okay. So it's actually a pretty rigorous process. Like you just can't show up. And that's something they wanted to protect against, right? They wanted to protect against a doctor setting up a doctor's office, quote unquote, in a strip mall, and you walk in there, pay $60, and you get your medical card.
Right.
No, you have to, that over time, that doctor has to see that, okay, you have chronic pain, opioids aren't working. Okay, I can recommend cannabis, and then you have to go to a specific type of pharmacy where an actual licensed pharmacist has to hand it to you. It's going to be a pretty rigorous process, and they want to do that to essentially weed out people faking symptoms, which in my personal opinion, that's inevitable. That's with many things in life.
Sure.
People do that, but they don't want it to be rampant. And I talked to one of my senators, and originally they were against the bill. I want to say they're still against the bill, but his concerns were very valid, and he's just worried that we don't want to run into this thing quickly, right? Which makes sense because in South Carolina, this whole subject is taboo. And, all of a sudden we got a bill, and, basically I would say people are worried that this is going to lead to recreational down the road. No, it's not. I would probably say we're not going to expand if, when this bill gets passed. I would say it's probably going to be at least 2 years before the medical portion of it's expanded. I know, kind of like what you're saying about the Attorney General, as soon as this medical bill is done, you can have us back on about some other things we're going to be doing once this gets through, mainly on the decrim side, because I can't, as a person that, I'm not afraid to say it, in California, I had a DUI. Probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me, because I learned, one, wow, that was stupid, and I can lose everything in my life I've ever worked for. And two, it really showed me the inside of the criminal justice system and how horrible it is to get out of it, essentially get out of its grip, and how easy it is to fall back in. So, the way I look at it is that, this is my way of still serving my country, because I can't still serve. So not to get off track, but
no.
The medical cannabis, I think this is the first step. Let's get, South Carolinians exposed to it per se, show, hey, it's not as bad as it's made out to be. It's actually, it's to me, there's a lot of benefits. I will say, there's a couple drawbacks. It does make people, I guess I wouldn't say anxious. Like, what would you say, Chris? Like, goodness. You get nervous sometimes, right?
Yeah,
if you
paranoid.
Get a little too high, yeah, there we go. I wanted to use the correct wordage. And then for me, in California, when I was using basically every day, I like snacking, and cannabis makes that a problem. So that's probably the worst thing for me. Was the sweets I go through in a given night.
Yeah.
So there are negatives.
But, in comparison to alcohol or opiates, I mean, the negatives are vastly different, and obviously not as severe, just based on what you were saying, for sure. And I think you made some awesome points, because, I think even people who see that this is what the topic was today, they might just assume that we were just going to talk about how, we want to decriminalize and it should be recreational, and South Carolina's behind the times and blah, blah, blah. But I think it's important to say, for those who don't know about the benefits of medical cannabis, this was a great conversation for them to kind of get an idea of what actually is going on, what this bill actually is, because most people don't read bills. I mean, why would you? They're long, boring, and bogged down by, terms that you might not understand. So it's great that you were able to kind of break down what it does and does not include. So anybody who's apprehensive can kind of hear like, oh, no, this isn't a bill. This isn't an attempt to just make it legalized in South Carolina. They're not rushing into something. They're like, as you said, this is the most conservative medical cannabis bill in the country. It's a good way to just kind of test the water, see how it goes. And it doesn't mean it's going to open the door to anything else. It's literally just trying to help people with some severe issues, whether pain, mental issues, whatever it may be. So I think that's important that we get that out there. And for people who are listening and are like, okay, whether they were already on board or now are saying, okay, I was worried for whatever reason. And I should also say a lot of people's worries are probably based on, if they grew up in this, before the 80s and forward with the war on drugs and all that stuff, the things we were taught and told about cannabis and, we're basically trying to frighten us away from it. And then realizing, oh no, some of this stuff, including alcohol, which is legal, is far, far worse. In any event, basically was just trying to say like, it's okay if people didn't realize some of these truths.
And I don't know if you mind interrupting.
No, go ahead.
I think that to put perspective on it, cannabis started becoming, I guess you could say, illegal in 1937 with the Marijuana Tax Act. So thousands of, we started using cannabis, thousands of years ago, and it's only been illegal for about 4 generations per se. Okay. And I think, to really show, and this is kind of going off topic of medical, but to really show that there's a kind of a manufactured negative put on cannabis during that time, I suggest people to look up the LaGuardia Committee of 1944, 1945, I want to say it is. It's essentially prohibitionists of cannabis funded this 10-year study in Harlem to, prove that cannabis is a gateway drug and kids are going to use it and crimes are going to go up. And all these very well-renowned doctors I got in New York at the time that got paid to do this, the first finding was cannabis is not a gateway drug. And this is in 1945, right when all this started becoming illegal. And it's been really suppressed back then. And I only found it, I would say probably 2 months ago. So that's an interesting read if you want to go read an old medical journal, one of the first medical journals on it.
That's fascinating that they said it's not a gateway drug, because DARE program, when I was growing up, that's what they hammered home. Like, it might seem not as bad, but it's a gateway to all the worst stuff. And
I've seen people use cannabis to get off.
Right. You're talking about people using it to get off opiates, which can be very, very dangerous and harmful. It's fascinating, just the history and how we got to this point with all these misconceptions and things. And I'll definitely look into that. It's really fascinating. And this is anecdotal, but it is backed by, like you said, other studies and things. But just in my personal life, knowing friends who drank and friends who smoked cannabis, the drinking was always worse. It was always leading to more problematic or outright illegal or wrong activities. Whereas my friends who were, quote unquote potheads, it was completely different. They weren't getting into the same trouble that the heavy drinkers were getting into. If there was a problem with someone at a party, it was probably with someone who was drinking, not someone who was just smoking cannabis, whatever it may be. I mean, it's anecdotal, but I think if you ask people who have experiences, they would probably say the same. It's just, that alone should tell you a lot of the things we were told were not accurate, for whatever reason. But for those who are listening, whether they would want to use it recreationally or not, or just people who are listening like, hey, look, it's not for me, but I really want to help the people who need it for medical reasons. What do you guys think is the best way for them to support getting this act pushed through? How can they help?
Chris, sorry to always talk, but I'll take the lead on it again. So I've tried to simplify it as much as I can, because a lot of people confuse your federal representatives with your state representatives. So you would essentially go to, I think it's scstatehouse.gov. You type in your address and it'll show you who your South Carolina state senator and South Carolina state representative is. And all you literally have to do is just click on the name and it'll bring them to their page. And you can literally write a message right there, hit send, and it'll go to them. It's quite easy. for, some, we've tried to set up some stuff. So if you go to carolinadream.com, we're redoing everything. So we're not selling anything right now, but essentially there's an email sign up with some check boxes. We only ask for your address because I want to tell you who your representative is right off the bat. And from there, I want to learn how to write my senator. I want to learn how to call my representative. Like, how can I show up and help? How can I do this? Or, you want to hear from us because we're trying to launch a YouTube channel where we have kind of 15, 20-minute videos on, this is what hemp is. This is what CBD is. This is THC. This is the difference. This is a terpene. So it's a bunch of different check boxes for whatever you want. And luckily, since the bill is now at committee, Chris and I thankfully got like 2 or 3 weeks off. And then essentially come March, we'll be up in the Capitol again. So we'll, on our Instagrams and stuff, we'll post, hey, there's another press conference on this day. If you show up, I want to, one, personally meet you, so make sure you grab me before we start and stuff like that. But we're just trying to, gather the support and just really help end the stigma, educate people. And we just don't want South Carolinians to be scared to say that they support it. I think that's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, we were talking before we got on air about misconceptions and some other things. And you had mentioned some people are afraid, even if they support it. They might not even need it or even want to use it recreationally if it ever gets to that point, but they want to support and help, which is great. But they may be afraid to email or contact a rep. They think like the feds are going to show up, So people don't need to be afraid to email representatives, state senators, state representatives, and let them know that they support this. It's not going to put you on some list or anything like that.
Trust me, if there is a list, I'll go to jail first, okay? Because I'm way ahead of everybody. And I think this, the senators that said yes to the bill, they're ahead of me. So there should be no reason to be, that's what, that's why I joined the military was freedom of speech. That's something we have in this country. That's absolutely beautiful. And you shouldn't be scared to voice your freedom of opinion on, hey, I don't want to use cannabis, but I don't think we shouldn't be allowing medical patients to have access to it.
Exactly. Yeah. You can't go to the state house and light up while you're doing this, but you can certainly voice your, support for this. And, you guys did a great job of letting folks know how they can do that. And I will provide, links to your websites and everything in the show notes as normal, as well as the State House website. But for those who, get there and they want to know the official names and things, the act is called the Compassionate Care Act. It is House Bill 3361. The Senate version was 150. So those are the official names and ways you can look this up or reference in your emails, to whoever you end up contacting. And I think I just wanted to make sure I got those out there. Yeah. So those are the official names and things. So if you want to contact, that's what you can use. I'm sure if you just say, I support the medical cannabis legislation, they'll know what you're talking about, but you'll have that information if you need it. And the links will be in the show notes and everything. I want to make sure we get all your, socials and websites and stuff. But before that, is there anything, because unfortunately we could talk forever because this is really fascinating and there's so much more to it. And like you said, as this legislation goes on, we can probably have you all back to talk about, when decisions are made and future steps and things. But is there anything right now that we didn't touch on that you think is important or you want people to know about this legislation?
Yeah, right now I guess you could say we've made it, almost halfway there. It's at this specific moment in time, it's kind of on a slower end. Still reach out to your representatives and tell them what you think. Chris, I don't know if I missed anything.
I just want to highlight again, thanking Senator Tom Davis and Jill Swing. And
while you're talking, I just remembered the other thing I wanted to say, because you can contact the committee directly as well. That's, looking at it right now. And you'd mentioned it before, the 3M committee. It's the the Medical, Military, Public, and Municipal Affairs Committee is the official title. So you can also send, even though they might not be your specific rep or senator, you can still contact people on these specific committees. And this is for any legislation, and let them know you support it and why. So then that they're more likely to get it out of committee to go before the entire legislative body. So that's the official name of the committee. And before I let y'all go, I want to make sure we get your, for your businesses, socials, whatever you think is important for people to get more info or support your farm and the store that you have. How can people find all that information?
For the farm, the website and IG, Facebook, it's Zetro Farms, or at Zetro Farms and zetrofarms.com, and that's ZITROFARMS.com. And then for the soon to come online store, it's Carolina Dream. So carolinadream.com, and then the Instagram is the Carolina Dream. Darn that one person that never used that account, and I can't get that name. And of course, like if you have any questions, of course, Chris and I are tagged in them. If anyone listening has any questions, just reach out to us on any platform. We do our best to always respond in a timely manner and give accurate information. That's the one thing, the one thing we like doing more than growing plants and and help building this industry in this state is educating. I can't educate unless you don't ask questions. So Chris and I will gladly, we'll set something up. I know you said you have us back on here. There's plenty of stuff. And I think, with this bill going through, Chris and I haven't been asked to speak on things more than in like the last 3 weeks. So it's been real fun, and I love teaching. So awesome. Chris, anything to add on all that?
Cody, you killed it, man. You really did.
I talk a lot, and I've been doing this for the last couple of weeks.
I wish the people of South Carolina, I just need them to know that how much work he's put into this is changed both of our lives, and we're here for the ride.
Yeah, I wish you both luck in this journey. I'll definitely be emailing, and I'm pretty sure I already have, but I will do it again because I know there's like several steps, and let them know that I support it. And I hope my listeners do too, because this is something that can help so many South Carolinians, get relief, get off opiates if they need to or just want to. It's something that could really benefit them. So I really appreciate you guys coming on and talking to me and answering some questions. I think it'll be very valuable, and absolutely. Not just saying it because you're on the phone now. I definitely would love to have you all back as there's updates because you are very knowledgeable, and I learned more stuff today about the bill and in general than I have, ever possibly. Thank you so much.
I'll definitely call you when they're voting on it on the floor. I'll be like, hey, you want live updates?
Yes. Then I can get the breaking news live tweet out there and everything when it comes across. That'd be perfect. But yeah, Cody and Chris, thank you both so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it, and best of luck.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
That's it. Thank you so much to Cody and Chris. Awesome interview. I hope you all learned as much as I did. Be sure to look at those links in the show notes. They'll also be on my website where I post every time there's a new episode, so you can let your state senators, representatives, wherever this bill may end up now, where it is currently or in the future, you can write to these folks and let them know you support the Compassionate Care Act. If you have questions, be sure to reach out to either of them. They said you can do that if you have further follow-ups after hearing that interview. Thank you to all of you for listening. Please rate and review this podcast. You can also support Holy City Center on Patreon, or you go to holycitycenter.com/shop and pick up some merchandise. Also, a big thank you to Tyler Boone for connecting me with Cody and Chris, as I mentioned, which was really great because I wanted to do an episode like this, and they were super knowledgeable, and I think it went really, really well. So thank you to him for that, as well as providing the music that you hear in every single episode. Thank you to Grace Lancaster Gogan for providing the logo for Holy City Center Radio, and Lindsay Marie Collins for producing it with LMC Sound System. Also listen to our podcast, FMB Radio. That is all I have for this week. A little bit of a long episode, but we appreciate y'all listening, and can't wait to continue. We've got some awesome guests lined up. So if you enjoyed this week, you're certainly going to enjoy the next, every episode, honestly. But for what I know, what we have scheduled, I know they're going to be good. And I'm having so much fun learning and talking to folks, and I hope you are enjoying listening to it. So with that, I'll let you go. Enjoy the rest of your day, whatever other podcast is up next. Good night and good luck.